So by now, you're probably aware of the fact that Israel has been attacked by Iran. Iran fired hundreds of ballistic missiles at them, overwhelming their Iron Dome defenses and causing a lot of damage. And of course, some reports say it's up to 180 missiles. I've seen other reports that say it's 400 missiles. We won't really know the extent of the attack. In fact, probably ever, because we're not going to get all the information out of Israel regarding military targets being impacted and everything else related to it. But regardless of that, it's a clear escalation in this much anticipated Middle East war, which we all knew was coming and was pretty predictable when it came to being on a timeline of right before the election. And these things are becoming so predictable at this point in time that it clearly shows they're no longer hiding their plans or their agenda or anything else when it comes to changing the way things work in this world. So, I gotta mention, Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and of course, thanks to them, I can get out here, give you this information, and give you some things to consider when it comes to your own preparedness, and they have you covered when it comes to all the stuff related to equipment that you might need to be ready for what's coming. So a big thanks to Midway USA. So, with this Iranian attack on Israel, and Israel invading Lebanon, ground forces on the ground in another country taking out targets, this is a war. It's a full-scale war. If you haven't figured that out yet, then you're just very optimistic, I guess. But regardless, the Middle East is on fire. The war is here. Israel is not going to leave this alone. They're going to have to respond, and they're going to respond in a way that's going to create an additional response, just like it always has. And so this spiraling escalation is going to continue until U.S. involvement becomes more direct, and then we have our Middle East war, which is what we like to do here in this country, at least according to the last few decades. Now, a lot of what we're seeing is that Iran was targeting specific military targets, including supposedly Mossad headquarters. They also targeted many military bases. They were also targeting infrastructure in the sense of some gas production facilities. So that's something you should be aware of in the sense of how this modern war is being fought. Logistics and infrastructure are the target. And we also have this dock worker strike happening with the ILA making their demands and those demands not being met. And look, I'm not part of that situation, and I'm not here to weigh judgment on who's in the right or the wrong of that scenario. But what I'm trying to tell you is that it will have an impact on the supply chain. That's pretty obvious. This war in the Middle East will have an impact on the supply chain. Also pretty obvious. This is all going to spill over and cause us problems here at home. And these problems, I don't believe you will see happening immediately. They will be dragged out because a lot of our retailers and a lot of suppliers here in the US figured out after last time that they needed to stock up some back stock in order to be ready for these types of disruptions. But that doesn't mean the disruption won't spike to the point of being hard to overcome. And a lot of these companies are going to find themselves struggling here within a few months, right? We might not see it right away, but we're going to see it eventually. So please keep that in mind when it comes to your prepping. Another thing that you have to be aware of is the fact that this war is dragging other people into it. And this is happening on October 1st, right? We have a missile barrage from Iran striking Israel in their major populated areas like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem right now. And we're not even at October 7th yet. And October 7th is likely to see something happen. I mean, this is a day of reckoning for a lot of people who are in that area and in that part of the world. But at the same time, it is obviously the anniversary of an atrocity that will be leveraged to create more atrocities. And don't for a second believe that we're immune to that here in the US just because of lack of proximity. So, your mindset might want to change a little bit. You need to be making sure that you have the supplies on hand that you need. You need to be making sure that any equipment or any materials that you need in order to finish any projects you're working on, you get before we actually hit those shortages. And like I said, we might not see them right away. And what's that? I'll tell you right now, that will cause a problem because people will say a week or two from now, hey, Magic Prepper, I told you nothing was going to happen. And although these dock workers are still on strike, and although this war in the Middle East has gotten exponentially worse, I'm still being able to find all the things I need at all the places I go. And I'm telling you right now, it's because that will be delayed because of the strategies being put into place by these businesses after what they experienced in 2020. But don't take my word for it. You can play around with fire if you want. Another thing to consider right now, and this is actually advice from a good friend of mine, which I appreciate, and I think it's worth sharing with all of you as well. You need to make sure you are stabilized in your systems. And when I say that, what I mean is you might not want to be playing around with new ideas or new projects that don't have a designated outcome. They're not something that you necessarily are sure if it's going to work for you or not. You really need to shore up all the systems you already have in place. If you are working on getting things put together, adding an experiment into the mix right now might not be the best idea. And so as a layman's example of this, and because I know people here love guns, because I do too, for example, if you have a lever action, and this is what you have right now, and this is what you're experienced on, and this is what you use the most, and maybe you don't have a gas gun or anything like that right this second, you might want to consider investing your time and effort into just getting the logistics system in place that you need for this particular weapon system and training and practicing on it so that you're as capable as you can be, rather than diving headfirst into something new and obscure that you're not quite ready for and you have no inventory to support. Because regardless of the effectiveness of something like an AR-15 over something like a lever action rifle, adding it to your system and then having the necessary supplies on hand and all the stock and ammunition and magazines and parts and everything else required to keep that up and running during a long-term scenario is a huge project to take on all of a sudden. And if this is something that you already use and you're already effective with and you already have all that inventory in place in order to support it throughout an emergency, then maybe the focus should be, what else can I do to support this system that's going to help me move forward more, rather than starting with something brand new out of nowhere. Of course, this is not me trying to suggest everybody should have a lever action instead of an AR-15. All I'm saying is that what you have now might be what you need to just focus on and invest in and support. Now, of course, I'll still be bringing you new ideas, product reviews, firearms reviews, all kinds of stuff related to things that might expand your horizon regarding preparedness. But at this moment, at least just verify that everything you have right now is already in place and is supported properly. Buying 4 different types of handguns and then trying to buy optics and flashlights and holsters for all 4 of them, and then trying to play around with different magazines and ammunition types and everything else might not be the best idea when we're facing a supply chain crisis and when we're facing a world war crisis, which is what this is, by the way. So keep that stuff in mind as you move forward. We can talk about the news and we can talk about the fact that even in Israel, right before this rocket attack by Iran, there was an attack by people on the ground who actually had a mass shooting event occur, right? And of course, those people were eliminated, but a lot of other people who were nearby were affected by it, and there was definitely fatalities. So it's not just rockets. Like, this stuff is happening on the ground as well. And you have to be prepared to deal with something like that, even if it's super unlikely, even if the possibility or the probability of it is extremely low. Why would you want to risk it, right? So keep those things in mind. Not only do we need to talk about what's happening, but maybe we should talk about the mindset or what it is we should be considering while these things develop. Because as of right now, things are getting very chaotic very quickly. And I expect there to be supply chain issues. I expect there to be the fallout of war. And what does that usually entail? Usually oil prices go up, which affect the price of everything. Not to mention everything that we tend to want to stock up on here in this community: MREs, ammunition, parts, anything related to logistics and being able to protect yourself. That stuff either gets more expensive or hard to source. So I'm bringing this information to you now. And look, I got to jump back on the reloading bench today. Knocked out some really lightweight, I don't know if we'll call them 357 Magnums. Let's just call them 38 Special, maybe plus Ps. Regardless, really fun to shoot out of this thing because they're barely anything. But that was something that I wanted to get back on and just kind of make sure everything was working properly and that all my very primitive tools that I use for reloading, because I don't have a progressive press or any of those things. I use a single stage press, I use hand tools, and the reason for that is because I don't reload on a large scale. I reload for therapy. But those supplies and components are definitely still to this day more expensive than they should be and harder to source than they used to be. So with all that being said, be vigilant, consider the current state of the world, and think about what it is you actually need and what it is you actually have a support system for, and then make sure that that's what you're invested in. If you've been holding off on getting, let's say, parallel solar cables in order to daisy chain some solar panels together to make your emergency power unit a little bit more effective, right? But you're not buying all the cables you need in order to actually daisy chain everything together. Maybe that's a priority right now compared to things that aren't really providing you with a whole lot, or things that actually provide too much redundancy. When I say too much redundancy, I mean, you guys know exactly what I mean by that. I don't have to tell you what I mean. So please keep this all in mind as you move forward. Keep getting prepared. Go to magicprepper.com if you want to join the Discord. It's free. You can jump in there. We got a good network of people there. We also have the ability to have different channels there for every state. So that way, if maybe you're in North Carolina or Tennessee or any of these areas that were affected by this recent storm, you might be able to link up with people there who, I don't know, may be able to provide you with some information or who knows what. But these are things that we can do as a community online. And in person, of course, there's a lot more you can do, but that's not easy for everybody to accomplish. So just throwing that out there. Anything else you need from me at all, you know what to do. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.